my mother and father who grew up in Mississippi, who understood, as the journalist was saying, that they had the impunity to shoot just because. That sounds like Jim and Jane Crow South.
Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to the Struggle Video News. The Israeli government lies, and when the lie is exposed, they run to the next lie, and the corporate media rarely does any examination. Back in November, the IDF talked about a James Bond villain-like secret Hamas headquarters under Al-Shifa Hospital. That was the IDF excuse for the siege of the hospital. They gave the impression that they were going to seize the Hamas leadership and the war would be over. When that fantasy went up in smoke, a new claim was made. Hamas had escaped south. So the invasion went ever deeper, and over 1 million people were driven out of their homes. By March, the only city that was relatively untouched was Rafah. Then the IDF said Hamas was hiding there with 4 full brigades. Well, now the Israelis are in Rafah. They're all along the border with Egypt. They're in the center of the city. Where are those brigades? Military resistance to the IDF continues all over Gaza. And where are the Israelis taken by Palestinian forces into Gaza? The IDF said it would rescue them. Along with the lies, we get atrocity after atrocity. This video is children living in tents in Rafah. After the Tent Massacre, it's unknown how many of them are still alive.
واحدة بالحرب بالعيد في العيد
One child killed in the attack was Ahmad al-Najjar, whose headless body was found in the rubble. He was 18 months old. The latest horror is the June 6th attack against a crowded UNRWA school with at least 40 dead. CNN reports there were an estimated 20,000 people living in the school facilities and on the grounds. Others said 6,000. By the way, a law is being considered by the Israeli parliament that would designate UNRWA as a terrorist organization. So this attack may just be a foretaste. In Jerusalem, there's an Israeli holiday called Flag Day. Tens of thousands march into the Muslim quarter where they scream insults against Palestinians and bellow out death to Arabs. Here they insult the Muslim prophet Muhammad. Here they sing the popular genocidal Israeli song, May Your Village Burn. National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir took part in the Flag Day event and told the media that he returned here to send a message to Hamas and every home in Gaza and the north. His message was, Jerusalem is ours, Damascus Gate is ours, Temple Mount is ours. Ex-Israeli soldier Yehuda Shaul points out this T-shirt worn by some marchers that shows Muslim sites on the Haram al-Sharif smashed and being replaced by a Jewish temple. There is a powerful, deranged movement in Israel that wants to do just that. Palestinians shuttered their shops, so the mob turned its rage against journalists. The man being threatened in the photo was reporter Nir Hassan for the Israeli newspaper Haaretz. In Hassan's article about that day, he wrote, "But journalists are not the story. The story is the depth of the cesspool to which the religious Zionist society has sunk. This is a society whose main annual event is a sickening demonstration of racism and violence." And this headline: Israeli police detained Palestinian photographer who was attacked by Jewish youths during Jerusalem flag march. Saif Qasemi was slightly wounded in the head after about 10 Jewish boys attacked him. He continued to work and was later detained by police, and his equipment was confiscated after a known right-wing activist contacted them and claimed that Qasemi was a Hamas operative. In recent weeks, we've been showing you parts of MEC's Courage Award ceremony to Palestinian journalists. Before we continue, a short animated video by the terrific Italian artist Gianlucca Costantini about Palestinian journalists. And the price these journalists pay continues to be immense. A small bundle is all that remains of the son of journalist Moatsam Dalloul, who he says was run over by an Israeli tank. Another son of Dalloul was killed months ago in an Israeli bombing. Now, Pastor Anthony Bennett of the Mount Aery Baptist Church of Bridgeport, speaking at the Courage Award ceremony in Danbury, Connecticut.
Good evening. Good evening. I'm honored to be with you. Certainly want to thank you, Mr. Stanley Heller, for the invitation to work with this organization and to honor what you all have done over the decades. I'm also appreciative of the establishment of the Courage Award, last year's recipient as well as this year's honor of the Palestinian journalists. As you stated, I'm sure that the journalism department will benefit from the monetary contribution. I also want to acknowledge those whom I have had the privilege of sharing this platform. Thank you. I could hear from you a little bit more. Maybe I'll share a couple of my minutes. Well, we'll deal with that. We'll deal with that. Because I am a Baptist preacher, If you know, I'm a Christian Baptist preacher, Reverend Jerry, associate at Mount Aery. Thank you for being here. Lives in Danbury. I've celebrated this year 30 years of pastoring Mount Aery in Bridgeport and serving the community, which means I have about 30 years of speeches that I could share, but I will spare you. I will spare you. I've been asked to share remarks congratulating and celebrating with you the remembrance. So much I can share, so many parallels, as I had the privilege to go to Palestine. We could not fly into Tel Aviv, we had to fly into Jordan. 2018 with the Tree of Life, for it is a moment where you must choose sides, and we chose the side of our Palestinian brothers and sisters. I was able to gain access there through Tree of Life and my friend and dear brother of 20 years and plus, Bishop John Selders and Lady Pam Selders and others, Muslim and Christian and Jewish Voices for Peace. And so tonight I want to ground what I share in the 10-15 minutes that I do have. I want to ground it in what I believe is a truth. The courageous artist and journalist are the actual prophets of our time, for they speak what many may feel. We honor their courage tonight with you. We join. They have done the right thing even in difficult times, as the journalist shared. Whatever sacrifice they had to make to share the truth. And so I want to frame these remarks, this conversation, in line with my Christian text, the Old Testament Hebrew Bible, the roots. There is a line, a scripture verse that says, "I will not be silent." And in context, this scripture speaks about the worship of God. And yet I want to expand for this occasion to suggest that the journalists and the artists and those who are helping here, this organization, those who seek to live in the prophetic understanding of speaking on behalf of the divine, must have the courage to say, "I will not be silent, whatever the cost." For the reality is, if I remain silent, the cost is higher. This is the question that was raised by my Morehouse brother, the Reverend Reginald Sharp, pastor of the Fellowship Baptist Church of Chicago, who just this past weekend, some of you may know, President Biden spoke at our alma mater. And Reverend Sharp was the baccalaureate speaker, in which there were some controversy and pushback from some of us alumni regarding President Biden's coming to our great institution. And yet it was the words of Dr. Sharp that stood out for me on this occasion. He addressed the tension that was in the air at Morehouse, and he said it like this, and I quote, "When an institution who taught you to be socially conscious turns and then asks you to become conveniently silent, it will make you want to hold your head down." And yet be clear, as Dr. Sharp spoke those words, his head was up and his conviction was clear that he would not be silent, even in the face of his elders and in the face of the coming of President Biden. He would not be silent about what's happening in Gaza, in the Congo, in Haiti, and even in our beloved Atlanta, Georgia. And I did say that it is a call and the challenge that we now honor the memory, the sacrifice of the Palestinian journalists who were nurtured and trained to report accurate news and to raise the social consciousness in through their journalism. And yet, like in the United States, many journalists, like the prophets, like preachers, will eventually feel the pressure to become conveniently silent in the face of sponsors and officials who want them to be conveniently silent on matters of Gaza, the West Bank, and the region, as though they don't see what they see or hear what they hear. And so I'm thankful for my brother, and we've joined, whether you know it or not, thousands of African American clergy who have been standing up for Palestine, calling for ceasefire since before our choice. So you are not alone, is what I'm really trying to say. You are not alone. And more than you realize, there are people that are fighting the fight, because we do understand the connections between the civil rights struggle. My mother and father, who grew up in Mississippi, who understood, as the journalist was saying, that they had the impunity to shoot just because. That sounds like Jim and Jane Crow South, where my mother and father grew up. So this is not a foreign connection. It is not a long leap for us. And so I'm thankful for the invitation. In the next 10 minutes that are mine, I want to share, because I got to get you all out. I want to share, Brother Stanley, you asked me to share a little bit of my experience in Palestine. And obviously I can't do it in the 10 minutes that I have left. But I want to share my experience in Palestine, where I saw the courage that you're honoring tonight. I saw the courage and the refusal to be silent. There are two quick stories I want to share. First came from our time in Jerusalem. We journeyed January of 2018. And we journeyed to Jerusalem. And we all know that the Abrahamic faiths of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and other indigenous faiths are there. And yet, our tour guide, who was an advocacy coordinator for Grassroots Jerusalem, soberly reminded us of the blatant inequities of the Israeli occupation of Palestine and subsequent oppressive realities of the Palestinian people, many that you've heard and you know and you've connected. And many of my Bridgeport Islamic Community Center brothers and sisters, unfortunately, have shared stories of losing loved ones. And so as we toured East Jerusalem, where Palestinian Christians and Muslims were permitted to live, as well as West Jerusalem, where only Israeli settlers, as they were called, were able to live. It was during our time there that our tour guide declared to our group, in essence, that in this land known to be holy, so many unholy things take place. And she was sharing the history that you all know of the demoralizing Israeli occupation that has been in Jerusalem, Gaza, and other places, and how Palestinian families and children in particular have been abused, traumatized by all of the Israeli terror. Not just the killing, but the day-to-day brutal abuse. And as I thought about that, as I saw and I witnessed, and yet I saw the resistance and the resilience to fight, because this was and this is their place. The land that was soiled and soaked by the blood of ancestors, their ancestors, made me think about the blood, that soil that is soaked by the blood of our ancestors, my ancestors. Whether it is the ancestral burial grave that was built in the metropolitan New York area, that was built upon the tombs of my own ancestors. We see the connections. We were treated in the days of Jim Crow and segregation in similar ways as our Palestinian brothers and sisters are being treated now. And their efforts there and here to roll back the clock. So it's not a very long leap for us to understand why our struggles are mutually connected and tied. together. For how dare we as people in America, African Americans and those in how dare we believe we are equals treated and created by God? How dare we believe we have the same rights? How dare Palestinians believe they are created by God and have the same rights as Israelis? And an Israeli death, a Palestinian death, is just as significant as an Israeli death. How dare we want our children to learn and to play together in safe places? And yet, just like Chicago, just like in places in Bridgeport, where the stereotype of Connecticut, and yet, as I've had to do funerals of senseless violence, not all black on black crime, even though we don't talk about white on white crime. Most crime takes place within the race. We realize that the way that there is a reporting is what keeps us believing that one group is better deserving of life than the other. Second story I want to highlight happened on Friday afternoon, January the 5th, as we concluded our time in Jerusalem and headed toward the desert area of Negev in Israel occupation territory. In Negev, our group would see firsthand the devastating impact of the Israeli occupation would have on several of the indigenous peoples of the land, including, I heard mentioned, the Bedouin people. And our guide for the succeeding 4 days would be the central leader within the Bedouin community by the name of Khalil Alamar. Khalil was slim-built in his mid-50s, who was somewhat a legendary hometown hero, and that he was one of the few who were able to pursue education and to use it to carry on his family tradition of home ownership, community leadership, and resistance of the Israeli occupation. His training was in mathematics, business, and law, and he helped advocate for the Bedouin rights of land, water, and services that are controlled directly and indirectly by the Israeli Authority. For instance, we knew that we were in the Palestinian area not only by the huge separation wall or the wall of apartheid or barbed wire fences, but also because every place had a huge black water tank on the rooftop. And the reason for this was because the Israeli Authority at any point infrequently would shut off the water supply, affecting tens of thousands of Palestinians. In addition, Palestinians were rarely granted permits to renovate and expand their homes. And if Israeli Authority discovered a house was being added on or expanded, they would show up unannounced and give current occupants 20 minutes to leave. And so your lived experience, our gained understanding. And so within the 4 days and 3 nights of sleeping in our big tent without heat, because electricity was an expensive luxury, we felt and could relate to the trauma, the threats and struggles of the Bedouin people. And one of those nights, as we were driving, our tour guide was driving to his house along the drive, I asked him how he and the community of thousands of people continue to have hope and to resist in the midst of all that is against them. To which he replied, "It is not easy, and at times it is quite difficult and discouraging." Yet in his strong Arabic accent on his English words, he, as a matter of factly and succinctly said, "We don't have the privilege to quit." And when I heard him say that, something jumped in my spirit. We don't have the privilege to quit. I come from people in this country who could not read and write, who would have their eyes poked out for trying to read and write. And my grandmother from Mississippi, My father, 8th grade education. One of the first in my family to get a terminal degree. But I don't get it because of me. I get it and I work what I do because I don't have the right to quit based on all the sacrifices that have been made for me to get here.
Mobilize the Intifada! Resistance is justified! When people are colonized! Resistance is justified! When people are occupied! Gaza, you will see! Palestine will be free! We will free Palestine! Within our lifetime! 1, 2, 3, 4! Occupation no more! 5, 6, 7, 8! Israel is a terrorist state! 1, 2, 3, 4! Open up the prison door! 5, 6, 7, 8! That's how we will liberate! Free Palestine! Free Palestine! Free Palestine! Free Palestine! From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. From the sea to the river, Palestine will live forever. Palestine will live forever. Palestine will live forever.
That's our program for today. See our program next week at this time. I'm Stanley Heller for the Struggle Video News.